The Android manifest file is an XML file that describes to the operating system the application's ID and its capabilities. The name of the file is always the same, Android manifest.xml. The first time you open it, you'll see this graphical UI in Eclipse that lets you fill in critical parts of the manifest. You can get to most of the features of the manifest file through one of these tabs, labeled Manifest, Application, Permissions, and Instrumentation. But you can always edit the file in raw XML code by clicking on the last tab. The manifest file starts with a namespace declaration pointing to schemas.android.com/apk/res/android and assigns a namespace prefix of Android. All of the attributes that are used throughout the XML file will then use that prefix, such as the version code, the version name, and so on. The manifest element is the root element, and it has three critical attributes. The package points to the unique identifier for the app, and it does need to be globally unique, as I've described previously. Typically, this is accomplished by using the organization or the developer's domain name in reverse domain notation and setting that as the beginning of the package name. So my package might be com.davidgassner, and then I can use anything after that. We'll stick with the root package that I'll be using throughout this course, org.example. This package must match the root package in which you place your Java classes. If you change this package, you also need to update the manifest. So for example, I'll make sure that the manifest has been saved, then I'll come back over here to the Package Explorer, and I'll change it from Hello Android to Hi Android. When I make that change in my package structure, some refactoring will happen in the XML file, but not everything you need. For example, down here, the name of the package has been updated to show the new actual package name that contains this class, main activity. But the package hasn't been updated here. I would have to do that manually. I'll switch this all back to the version that I'll be using, Hello Android, and once again show that the manifest has been updated in the activity element down here. The next two attributes are the version code and the version name. The version code is always an integer, and it should be incremented by 1 each time you update an app and distribute it to the Google Play Store, the Amazon App Store, or any other application distribution channel. Again, the version code is numeric and it must be an integer. You can't use fractions and you can't use alpha characters. But the user doesn't see the version code. They see the version name. And this can be any string you like. A new Android app will have a version code of 1 and a version name of 1.0. That would be the version that you use when you deliver it to the App Store for the first time. But the next time you deliver a version, you would update the version code to 2, and you might change the version name to 1.1, or 1.01, or 2.0, depending on what you want to communicate to your users. Next is the user's SDK element. There are two required attributes here, min SDK version and target SDK version. And there's an optional attribute called max SDK version. When you're editing this XML file manually in Eclipse, you can type the beginning of the attribute name without the Android prefix, and then when it auto-completes, Android will add the prefix as needed. So for example, let's say I wanted to target Jelly Bean. That means I'm going to compile it against that version of the platform. I would set the target SDK version to 18 for Jelly Bean 4.3. But I then might say that this app can also run in later versions of Android, so I would set this to 19, and that would be for KitKat. Again, I'm going to reverse all these changes and go back to the default. The application element contains pointers to certain resources and also certain properties. The icon is pointing to the IC Launcher graphic, which is in the drawable subfolder of the resources folder. This is how you address an existing resource using XML syntax. Start with the character, then the name of the folder that the resource is stored in. You only need to put drawable here, even though the full names of the files are things like drawable.xhdp. And again, it's up to the operating system to figure out which version of this graphic to use, depending on the current device's pixel density. Next is the label attribute. This describes how the application will be represented in the device's application list and start screen. I'll describe how this label is used in a number of places later in the course. This is a string resource, and it's defined in another kind of XML file. To jump to this resource, hold down the Control key on Windows or the Command key on Mac, and then move the cursor over the resource and click. And you'll open the XML file in which the resource is defined, and it'll be highlighted for you. Here's the resource name, app name, and here's its value, Hello Android. I'm going to add an exclamation mark here and save that change, and then the next time I run the app, we'll see how it's updated on the device. There's also a theme attribute pointing to the application theme, and again, we'll get to those details later on. Finally, we get to an activity element. Each screen in an application is known as an activity, and each activity has to be registered with the application through this application manifest file. The name is the fully qualified name of the activity, and it must match the actual package name. The last time I changed this package, the refactoring didn't happen automatically, so I'll fix it manually. You can describe your activities with complete package and class names, or you can use a shortcut of just a dot and then the name of the activity. The single dot means the current package, and that would be the application's base package. Here's that label again, pointing to app name, and here's an intent filter. And this intent filter is telling the operating system when the user wants to start up this application, this is the activity that should start up first. I'll save this change, and I'll go back to the main activity class, and then I'll run the application in the emulator again. When the application opens, notice that the string resource I changed is shown here with the exclamation mark, but it's also shown on the application list. I'll touch the Home button, then bring up the application list, and I see that the name or label of the application is updated here as well. I'll click and hold, and then drop the application on the home screen, and the label is being truncated on this version of the home screen, but on a larger screen, that exclamation mark might show up. So that's a brief tour of the manifest file. We'll get into other changes you can make in the manifest file throughout this course.